Good morning. Good morning to everyone. I cannot hear the floor. I cannot hear the floor. Unfortunately, it's going to be difficult to translate. Cannot hear the floor.
And to open this first forum of the One Ocean Summit. C'est un forum qui va être dédié totalement donc à l'industrie de la propulsion par le vent, an emerging industry which is paradoxically at the forefront of modernity, of clean shipping with blossoming initiatives everywhere in the world. C'est aussi une industrie avec des projets et des réalisations nombreux en cours qui, donc, je le disais, fleurissent partout.
It's also a project which is to do with dealing with the European Space Agency Airseas, which is going to be transported by a sailing cargo from Calliope next year. And you have here some people and transatlantic transport using sailing boats, sailing ships, using wind power, also coastal shipping, of course, but there's a great deal to be done still.
Field. What is happening in this room is not very important. What is far more important is that hundreds of thousands of people are now watching us. Je vais terminer cette très petite.
I will end this brief introduction by telling you and just saying that the recommendations that are going to be made to you at the end of this forum, we will be following them very closely. The recommendations are going to be made. We will follow them very closely with the Maritime, with the windship federations all over the world. This is a kind of bilingual translation, bilingual speech. Some of it is in English and some of it in French. So we will also follow the decisions that are going to be made on this coming Friday by the head of state. So now,
very good.
I would like to wish you an excellent dialogue, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Français. So bonjour, good morning, all.
Good morning.
Je m'appelle Florent.
My name is Florent. I am president of the association, Windship Association, and I'd like to thank you all today. I'd like to thank you all who've been following us online. I'd also like to thank those of you who are participating in the forum, and I'd also like to suggest I'd like to thank you very much for being able to do this within the Ocean Summit. Now, Windship is the French association which makes it possible to accelerate wind power. And its objective is to be able to reduce massively today and now, here and now, the emissions from shipping to protect our oceans and the world. So we regional and local. We also participate International Windship Association. This acts, as its name indicates, at international level. Now, the Secretary General of Windship, shall we say, will be able to send us a key message and a very good piece of news as well, because our approach comes from a shared determination to reduce impact of shipping, and this is why we want to use wind power, because it's already available and it's able to decarbonize and to reduce it to 2 figures, and which will be essential for tomorrow to be able to use the hybrid ships, zero-emission hybrid ships. So we would like to invite you to upload the white paper, which will make it possible to deal with some subjects we're going to see today. And I'd like to suggest 2 subjects to be able to deal with the question of how the proposal using wind power is already available to be able to decarbonize, and also how we can speed up this dynamic, how we can use it, and what are the best means to do it, to the triggers that we can use. I'd also like to invite you to our first roundtable, Lesage, who is Secretary General of Airseas, which has just been set up on the city of Bordeaux and Wifes Armateur, a special wind-powered system. So, Stéphanie, over to you, please.
Bonjour à tous.
The music, please.
I will start my introduction in English for our friends. So I would like to remind a couple of figures. First, 3% is 3% of 3% of the global emissions are due to the shipping sector worldwide, and 13% of those emissions are due to the shipping sector in Europe, which is huge. Another figure, according to a report and study of the British Ministry of Transport, they study and they assess that by 2050, 50% of the worldwide fleet should be equipped by wind propulsion solutions, which is huge. We know also that the part of renewable energy shall increase significantly. And we know also that alternative fuel are and will not be sufficient and sufficiently mature and sufficient quantity to be deployed massively in the worldwide, on the worldwide fleet. So I'm really pleased to moderate this first workshop, and I will switch in French to introduce to you my guest, Nils Joyeux, CEO and co-founder de Zéphyr et Borée.
Olivier Barreau, who is a co-founder of Français. Then Alexandre, Marin, and we also have online Ferrer-Desclaux, co-founder of Down for Blue, so also wind-propelled power. So my first question really is for Nils. When we're talking about wind power, what do we mean by wind-powered? What kind of system do we have? What kind of energy is used? Good morning, everyone. So, what does it mean, modern sailing, modern wind-powered vessels? Well, I'd like to tell you. So, sailing power, as we see today, and which is going to be developed ahead on a massive scale, is nothing to do with this old sailing that we saw, the sailing boats that we saw last century. So, I'd like to dwell on 2 points. First of all, the type of technology. We will see the types of technology which are very different. Turbo sails, we've got simple sails, we've got traction methods. So this isn't just a technology that's going to predominate, because there are several of them, because we can understand the future cargoes will be set up differently. And for each kind of use, each kind of boat, each kind of ship, technology will be perhaps better developed than the generation before. So I think that the common point between all these different technologies is that we gain by automation, simplification, and the approach by the crew is on-off, which means that you can use some systems of wind power on major cargoes today. And then the second point now, which perhaps is less visible, less evident, but still very important, is meteorological routing with very specific weather forecasts, which makes it possible to be much more reliable, and which which means that you don't have to just depend in a random way on the use of wind. So what's really important here is that to use wind on cargo, it's a very good idea, of course, but it's really the only solution that we have today in the very short term to decarbonize carbon for cars. People have got hybrids, but for major cargoes transporting tens of millions of tons from Asia or USA, the only way to decarbonize short term is to use wind power. That's the only way. We can understand now a question that there's automation, and we've got this question of predictive. It's very useful to see if there's no wind, if the wind drops, well, it's because you've got to use other methods. So these tools are these essential tools. I'd like to ask Olivier. Olivier, how do you think can we use wind power to get away from carbon and improve at the moment? Olivier. Right. Well, we can use it easily. That's what Nils was saying, especially since the yield from one system for wind is very raised compared with all other systems that we can use with synthetic fuels or hydrogen or so on. There's much higher yield, much higher result. from using wind power. And I think in 2050, children who see the pictures of our sailing boats at the moment, of our present-day cargo ships, will be very surprised that they won't see any sails on them, because I think it's very likely that it's a very effective way. Of course, you don't put sails on cars, but you put them on boats, and they're very effective. But we need to be able to finance it all, to finance this approach. And the difficulty is that in 1 litre of petrol, you've got 10 kilowatt hours. Well, that costs €1.50. If you have to produce these kilowatt hours with your legs, you have to pedal 5 hours a day for 3 weeks on a cycle. So as far as energy is concerned, there's a huge amount of energy in a litre of oil, of petrol. And the second one is that who would accept to spend 5 days a week, 3 weeks pedaling a cycle just to produce 1.5 petrol? In other words, to say petrol is very cheap. So the question, if people say, well, petrol is a very, very cheap source of energy, that's what my point. If people say, well, I can't afford to fill up my car, well, it's just because it's a question of standard of living, not, of course, energy. So if we look at other methods of doing this, financing a system of using power, we've got to tax this kind of system. We've got to try to find some different solutions to do this. I think, but to finance those kind of ships, we have got to have some kind of carbon tax, I think, to do this. So the advantage of the wind is that you can use many systems. You can see we've got all kinds of different systems, 60 meters length. You can have just sailing boats, more or less boats which don't use any kind of fuel at all. Where we don't need any Vedic assistance, but this might be improved. And by experience, we are going to, in a few days' time, we're going to be setting a 52-meter cargo sailing boat, just like the first one, which was 24 meters long, and which is a kind of test. We want to try to reduce the industrial risk because we're not a huge company. We're still not a very big company, actually. But these are subjects which, well, a lot still remains to be done. And we need feedback, which we haven't had much feedback yet. And they're not yachts, they're not sailing boats, they're not cargo boats either. They're not kind of cruisers either. They're totally new boats, totally new ships, for which there's a great deal to be learned still. So there will be there'll be sails on them. Thank you very much, Olivier. Thank you. Now, when we know that 80%, I'm coming back now to the question of the world fleet, 80% of emissions are produced by the biggest boats in the world, which are tankers, they're container boats, container ships, and to that extent, how can wind power be used to get rid of the carbon footprint of the existing fleets? Because we can't just we can't replace them immediately by future boats. So I'm turning to Alexandre now. Alexandre, maybe you can help us. Oh, sorry, it's David, perhaps. David is, he might be somewhere in the ether there. Is he online? David, come in. We can hear him. Yes, here we can. Here we are. Yes. Right, good. I think that you can even see me as well. Good. I'm going to give my answer in English, okay?
So basically, wind propulsion can offer fuel savings of just 1 second to the technicians. I'm hearing my own translation in French.
Not very convenient.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Thank you. So what I was saying, wind propulsion can offer about 30%. I still hear the French translation, and it's very annoying. Thank you. Is it okay now?
Otherwise, you do it in French, up to you.
aucune idée.
Okay, so we will switch to... Non, David.
No,
on va...
David,
Passer au français sinon.
I can actually switch it into French if that's better for you.
Plus...
Perfect. Let's do that.
Donc je vous laisse...
Ouais.
Okay.
D'accord. Donc en fait, la
So,
propulsion à vent, elle peut offrir à peu près
wind-powered propulsion can have a 30% roughly reduction of the fuel consumptions on standard boats featuring a design that was not made for sails, actually. But we can have even better yield with boats which have been actually designed for being wind-powered. So it is clear for me that wind power will be a key in the energy transition and the energy mix. So we can divide these boats into two main categories. I think 90,000 ships exist worldwide if we exclude the oldest ships and the ships that are not well suited for being wind-powered. There remains 67,000 ships that are at sea and which actually produce.
Donc, comme vous disiez, vraiment,
and then remains the sail-powered vessels, so roughly 2,000. So the main challenge are actually 67,000, which pollute a lot right now. So wind power must be designed in order to have retrofit on existing vessels. I have prepared a few slides, so maybe we can have a look at those slides right now on the screen, so as to show to the audience and to demystify really the retrofits, to show you that it is actually not complex at all. So I don't know whether you can see the slides or not.
Oui, on peut les voir.
I think we can see it actually, see them. Sorry, David. Yes, great. So how does it work? How does retrofit work? So, of course, we need to prepare retrofit. First of all, design it, doing some naval architecture works, designs, so as to... And these pictures are rather strange, I have to say.
Je passerai 3 slides avant.
So, I would like
préparer ce rétrofit, c'est-à-dire
yes, so in order to design the retrofit, we need to think of all the modifications. So we must think about the foundations, where we're going to anchor the sail itself. In the shipyard, we see on this picture here, but all this work can be done with the ship not being actually in the dry dock. So it is, of course, an advantage. Of course, it is good to enjoy and to benefit a stoppage of the work so as to reduce the cost of that retrofit for the vessel. This work can be done without leaving the ship in the dry dock. Of course, we need to strengthen the base where the sails will be fixed. It is not that hard to do. That is very similar to a strengthening tool that we can do with a crane, and it is done on a very regularly. It is a very well-known technology. David, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. What I do understand from what you say and what is important to highlight, first of all, there are solutions in terms of retrofit. It doesn't require a dry dock, as you mentioned. And third point, those solutions allow to save up to and to reduce up to 40% of the carbon footprint and reduce the associated fuel consumption. So these solutions indeed must be implemented as soon as possible. So let me talk about the ships, vessels of the future. How can we actually use sails and the sailing bricks, so to speak, into those wind power vessels and the vessels in the future? I think what is important to mention is when it comes to cargo or commercial ships, the ships, the very design is made within the framework of a business plan, and that responds, of course, to scale savings, i.e. we built very big ships that can actually carry lots of containers and volume, of course. Your microphone is not working so well. Oh, that's better now. Yes. Close to the mouth is much better. So that rationale so has to make some scale saving is still valid, since the volume of transportation and of cargo is still increasing and the energy was still cheap. But now, since we want to reduce the emissions and the carbon footprint and take into account different sources for transportation purposes, I think that will change completely. And as for the energy price, what is important to note is that we actually use roughly 3,000 million tons, so it has to power the vessels at worldwide, and that quantity will be very hard to replace by new energies such as ammoniac, hydrogen, and so on. That is not only related to investment, but the production of energy in order to make those fuels will be too important. So we are indeed limited, and thus the best rationale we can use for the shipyards of the future and constructing, building ships in of course, stringent environmental rules and regulations. The best energy is the energy that we do not use at all. Of course, using wind power vessels, of course, is the best response to that, because it's free, of course, there's no carbon footprint whatsoever. So in that context and framework, really we need to find a balance between scale saving and 100% wind power vessels. I think we could use maybe the best in those two technologies and design vessels that can be reliable enough to provide robust, regular commercial routes and transportations. And of course, can reach up to 100% reduction in the fuel consumption. Let's transition to my next question. How can we secure the business plans of ship owners, the vessels owners? Well, the ship owners, the business plans, and their clients, of course, and more importantly, I would say. I would like to take the example of the first project we are developing with Ginmark, the canopy. And let me consider that example first. Of course, depending on the type of vessels and technology we can use, we can have different rationales, of course, and logics. But as for the canopy, the vessels cost up to 20% more than the traditional vessels. Capex is more important. But having said that, the saving in terms of fuels, of course, allows to have savings in terms of fuel consumptions, and of course we can offset the additional financial costs when it comes to the building of the vessels. So those ship owners who want to use those wind power vessels do know that these vessels won't cost more, and they will be able to benefit from the ecological bonus, really. So that is true for the current price of oil. And of course, in the future, legislation will become more stringent, and of course, there will be more pressure from society, societal challenges, and we have sales will become more and more profitable in the future. So there is no risk really to invest right now in wind power vessels. Last question maybe for Olivier. Wind and wind power can help us to go further and can be inspirational for other business models. Of course, it is very clear if we look very quickly at the smartphones, such as marine traffic. You can actually download on your smartphone. You can actually visualize for yourself all the vessels at the global level. A vessel, of course, that are equipped with AIS tracking equipment. That is amazing, of course. You can actually see for yourself globalizations. That is amazing. So beyond the sole efficiency of the wind power itself, of course, the wind will always be free, and that is very good. I think we can decrease the carbon footprint and decrease the pollution of the vessels.
Mais il faut surtout pas oublier, et je pense que
I think we must keep in mind
si on diminue pas
that if we do not decrease the number of vessels, cargo vessels especially at the worldwide level, all we are doing is meaningless, really. So,
soit qu'on l'organise,
reduction in the number of vessels needs
qu'on la subit,
to be done. Of course, we must be proactive in doing so. So let's be very realistic and pragmatic.
And le kilowattheure le plus écologique, c'est celui qu'on consomme pas, c'est ce que tu disais tout à l'heure.
Of course, the greener kilowatt is the one that we do not use and that we do not produce. So of course, I think we need to remove some vessels from the ocean. So we need to think differently, really, and we must relocate some productions. We must
dont on n'a pas envie de se passer, très clairement. Alors moi, je pense
use
qui importe des
shippings.
En Bretagne.
Shippings when we must.
Donc on va aller chercher.
Of course, that is true. For instance, when we must import coffee from South America into Brittany, for instance.
Du style, nous on a une torréfaction, une chocolaterie à Morlaix.
We have a chocolate factory in Morlaix, and of course we are not providing our outlets with the chocolate that is done solely in Borée, but we want to have regional factories or production outlets, so it has to decrease the carbon footprint. And all these raw materials are being imported with our wind-powered cargo, so it is really a new way to operate and to make business, really. And I think that what we are doing today
une évolution majeure
do reflect
ne serviront à rien si la société
changes
de façon
in society, the way we think, of course, but society at large must change. And people must think differently, of course, and adopt green principles, of course. So we must punish people, we must have a proactive approach and do interesting things, of course, but it's all about meaning, being meaningful. The way our civilizations do work right now can be improved and must be improved, and maybe growth must be reduced somehow. And I think we'll be better off, really. There's one sole planet, it is our spaceship. It must not be an overheated bin. And that's what we are doing, unfortunately. So let's try to be objective. Thank you very much, Olivier. If I had to sum up what we've just said, wind power does exist. There are solutions. These solutions can be implemented on the existing fleets and vessels. Right now, we do know there's not one sole solution that can be applied. A few won't be available for all companies, so we must use and design new infrastructure. So this so-called cell, brick and selling technologies must be implemented right now. So this is a question for our governments and for Europe, really. So what can you do, what will you do so as to further to implement this selling power, which is so important? Thank you very much.
Bien, après cette première table ronde
after
passionnante,
this
une petite
very fascinating round
la deuxième qui je crois
table,
est passionnante.
I would
largement
few transition words for the thousands and thousands of people who watch us and who listen to us.
Damien Grimont est un
I would like to call now Damien Grimont to provide us with his testimony. Damien Grimont is a seafarer. He has won Transat very recently. He's also a businessman, CEO of Profil Grand Large. we took part into the bridge in 2017, and within the framework of the ecological transition, and we'll see that cell and selling power is important. Damien works with a team of people. It is my pleasure to be part of that team, and Damien is organizing a big event called The Arch, and he shall tell us a bit more about this right now and introduce this event called The Arch. And we shall now watch a video.
Good morning, everyone. Need a better mic than that.
Oui, bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone.
C'est pas ce PowerPoint.
Well, it isn't that particular PowerPoint I wanted, actually. We might just try another one.
Alors, comme vous l'avez vu,
anyway, as you will have seen in this presentation,
en fait, le positionnement qu'on
the position we're doing is to look at all these wonderful new innovations. And there's a time, if you want to change your company, you've got to change people, but you've got to make them want to change. So what we're suggesting, it's an event, and to take advantage of the emotion of an event, to accelerate to accelerate the transition, the desire for transition, and therefore to make our planet much less polluted. So Arch really is a kind of around the tour, around the world of Europe, as it were, to look at the situation in Europe, and we'll be very happy once we've found our correct set of slides.
Voilà. Donc c'est avant tout
So we want to look all over Europe, to look at the different solutions in Europe for the planet. And we're going to start on a cargo boat, a cargo ship. We're going to go on a journey, it'll be a visiting exhibition and a visiting event on about 10 different cities, and you'll see them. So what we're going to do is we're going to launch an appeal to Europeans, May 2022, calling on all European networks in partnership with IBN and VSB, and we will cover the whole of Europe, which will be able to respond on all the European technopoles on 5 major themes. So it'll be food, mobility, energy, housing, and it will be the digital industry will have a huge impact on this. These different 100 solutions, we will suggest them, and the 100 prize winners, well, we're going to put them on a boat, a cargo ship, and we will put them on a sailboat, a cargo boat, which will be visitable and which will also be used in the marinas and in the docks. So we're very happy to be able to tell you today, because a few years ago, sorry, we can't do that.
En fait, avec Nils, il imaginait il y a 4
We
ans mettre des voiles
thought that we were going to, nobody would have thought 100 years ago that you could put sails on a cargo boat. We're rather hard put to translate with all that noise, but now it's going. So now it does exist, and we can tell you all about it. And You can see it now. That's what it looks like. And you can see that it has a huge hold and that we can offer all kind of solutions around Europe to be able to accelerate the impact of these solutions. So we're very happy to have this with Ariane Group. We signed a few weeks ago agreement to rent it, which will get this ship to go around the whole of Europe and show the necessary effort for transition. And you see that it's possible to use sails to reduce carbon impact. Now, what I'd like to add here is that, of course, we can add a very strong entrepreneurial movement. This came out of the bridge movement. We've got about 100 companies so far which will be able to impact the impact of this, work on their own brothers and sisters in the area, in the same professional, and be able to make a final trip between Genoa and Barcelona, and to have a major meeting to meet together with 100 prize winners and the solutions. The dates, note them. Today, May, we'll be presenting in Paris together with Change Now. You're familiar, it's the latest exhibition on solutions of the planet, and this will be under the European Presidency, the French Presidency of the European Union. We will send out calls for European and tenders for European solutions. It will be an exhibition for the end of the year. And then in May 2023, leave from Nantes, the Tour de l'Europe, and then from the 2nd to the 9th of July on Europa, which is the first gas-powered cruiser, and it's built in Saint-Nazaire, in the dockyard here, the naval shipyard, and it will be 300,000 between Genoa and Barcelona, 2 knots average speed. So thank you very much for all the information on this site. If you want to participate, please put down your names. If you want to participate, if you want to offer solutions, if you want to be a company, if you'd like to be, you can collect this information from the Arch website. Thank you very much for this summit. I think it's fantastic that we should get mobilized and we should change our behavior, because that is what we're doing. We need technological change, but we also need to change approach as well. So I think we've got to do it very soberly and dispassionately. Thank you. Thank you very much, Damien, for this dynamic approach. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to switch to English now.
Second session with Ludovic, Gérard, CEO of AYRO, which you just saw the wing sails they are manufacturing, which are going to be installed on the Alizé vessel. And Ludovic, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Florent. Good morning, all of you. I'm pleased to moderate this panel this morning, together with you, Florent, also President of Windship Association. We also have with us Jean-Philippe Guillon, who is Managing Director at CIC, Global Head of Asset Finance. We have online Géraud Pellat de Villedon, in charge of ESG for the supply chain in Michelin, the tire manufacturer, and John Cooper, the CEO of Bar Technology, a wing sail manufacturer. I will start with my first question to Michelin, to you, Géraud. I hope you can hear us. Géraud, are you with us?
It's very clear.
Thank you.
Yes, it's very clear.
All right. So my first question to you, Géraud, is Michelin is an important shipper all over the world, and I would say you are representing Michelin. What are the Michelin expectations from shipping stakeholders with regard to decarbonation? How do you foresee the wind assistance propulsion? And what are your end user, the end customer? Are they concerned by the CO2 emissions linked to the tires they are buying for their SUV nowadays? Thank you.
So thank you very much for your question. I have on the meeting, could you cut the French return, please? Because it will be difficult for me to speak either in English or to listen my answer in French. Yes, so in fact, we have some very big challenges.
Réponds en français, Géraud, si ça te gêne.
Je vais répondre en français. I'm going to ask.
And today, unfortunately, the solution offered by the maritime companies are very strange. We don't have so much solution. the only solution available today is only biofuel. And using biofuel, we have many questions because we have to understand where does it come from. We have to make sure that it will be available on the coming month and the coming years. So it's a very huge challenge for all the shippers today to find solution, sustainable solution to decarbonize our supply chain on the long term. So it is a reason why for us the wind it's a good solution, because using the wind it's very good to use the wind, because in fact we promote the reduce of the energy needs, and that it was exactly explained on the previous conference, is that we have to promote all the solutions that allow to reduce the energy consumption. So it's very key in our strategy to have those kind of solutions proposed by the maritime company, and it is something very important. Today we have more and more some customers that are asking to be delivered by a low carbon solution, and it is a very key topic on the coming years because we have those objectives that are quite challenging for all the shippers, Michelin included.
Merci Géraud. Ma question numéro 2 sera pour Jean-Philippe de CIC. CIC est une banque qui est bien établie et qui finance de nombreux projets dans le maritime notamment. Et vous êtes en particulier dans le tour de table pour TOT et pour Neoline, pour deux projets de bateaux à voile. Et vous êtes aussi signataire des principes de Poséidon. Jean-Philippe, qu'est-ce que le CIC peut faire de plus que les autres banques pour soutenir la propulsion éolienne? On connaît votre engagement et on aimerait bien que vous souteniez plus encore.
D'où vient notre engagement sur le Vélic, c'est pragmatique. Ludovic l'a rappelé, les banques sont des acteurs de la transformation écologique. Toutes les grandes banques
green transition, and all the banks that take part into this have objectives in terms of portfolio. So, of course, we have committed to the Poséidon program, and we've done some benchmarking activities. I would like to remind that those who actually are members of the Poséidon principles demands that the banks do some benchmarking and to compare that benchmarking score to the ideal curve given by NEMO, so has to decrease the carbon footprint by 50%. So we are compelled to publish that score, so we do have indeed some pressure to reduce the carbon footprint. Since the AYRO depends on, and the score depends on where ships are being actually operated by the ship owners and their technical characteristics. So being very pragmatic and practical, we looked at all the solutions that could be used, both on the short and also long term. And what we saw, that wind power seems the best solution, so has to reach an important carbon decrease in the short term. Of course, there are other pathways and other potential avenues, but having said that, they have constraints in terms of availability. We need huge investments so that these new fuels can be accessed. And of course, these fuels will be expensive, and we do know that is an important budget item for ship owners. So this is why that we have been focusing for more than 18 months on wind power solutions, wind power being used as the main power or an alternative way of power, and also looking at hybrid solutions combining wind power, electrical power using batteries, and ammoniac engines. So we do believe in these hybrid solutions, which may be the best solutions on the short term. So the funding of the wind power leads to a number of constraints and challenges, since those projects are usually supported and promoted by SMEs. And of course, those SMEs do not have always the abilities to make the decision to invest at that scale.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe.
We can improve this, I guess.
John, you are the CEO of Barre Technology, a designer and manufacturer of a wing sail solution. Two questions for you in one. Do you think that your experience in developing high-tech system for the America's Cup boat is something which should be a concern for ship owners or stakeholders? In other words, are they afraid of this high-tech Formula One of the seas being on cargo ships, operated 24/7 all year long? And the second question is, what is your feeling about the how the market, and in particular the ship owner, the shipyard, are welcoming the wind assistant propulsion nowadays, and how we could overcome the barrier which we see today?
Well, thanks, Ludovic. I hope you can see me properly. I've had to draw the blinds here. Very unusual, a sunny day in the UK. Well, it's true, America's Cup teams are more short-term performance-driven. Of course, they're just racing. So it's quite right that we at BAR Technologies now have the major focus on reliability and robustness in addition to pure performance. And we spun our business from the America's Cup entrant of 2017. We further developed our simulation tools, our digital-based solutions and techniques, our use of velocity prediction programs and performance modeling rather than just physical testing. These were major assets of ours in inventing and developing and patenting and now delivering our wind propulsion technology, wind wings, to the global market. The good news is that as long as you're clear and positive with this thinking, you can bring owners and other stakeholders with you. It's natural that we're talking to some of the most forward-thinking owners and charterers, like Cargill, who are a major technical partner of BAR Technologies. It therefore comes as no surprise that these organisations also have in-house experts that really understand and appreciate the engineering. So I don't think people are scared, but they certainly is an important part of initial conversation. I think the other benefits have been actually using our name and our brand and our skill to help influence other stakeholders. So, you know, in addition to that influence, all of the macro factors are now coming together in our favour. For a while now, most of all the companies that we deal with have to report on their corporate CSI properties, but now the whole world is demanding that sustainability challenge. And that's important as economics. Shareholders are pushing board to the largest companies now more than ever. These factors now sort of came to a crescendo, I guess, at COP26, which has further galvanised opinion. You know, a really good example of that is the work that we've been doing with ports. We haven't just been inventing our technology, but we're ensuring a pathway to ensure that we can actually deploy it. A few years ago, I think it's fair to say that when we first started speaking to ports, few of them were keen on receiving vessels with wind power technology, fearing that port operations might be adversely affected. The landscape now has totally changed. Powerful owners, charterers are actually demanding that ports receive our vessels. And in fact, actually the ports themselves see this sort of hero technology as more prestigious and are more welcoming. You know, and all of these factors are coming together. We saw recently that EEDI and EEXI calculations have changed, and therefore all of these benefits are now falling into place. So I think that, yes, of course, America's Cup was important for our beginnings, but actually we're way past that, and we're part of this important sort of global industry in decarbonising shipping. So thanks, Ludovic.
Thank you, John. Ma question maintenant à Florent.
Question to Florent now. There's a charger, we've got a banker, we've got a cargo charger, we've got people who find solutions, and we've also had a ship shipper telling us about this. So you're president of Windship. Have you got any kind of ship owners who are on board, as it were? What is the role of Windship and others in promoting wind power and wind propulsion?
Merci, Ludovic, pour
Thank you, Ludovic. Thank you for this question. Coming back to English now, the speaker.
We speak about International Windship Association as well as Windship. So yes, there are large ship owners, there are energy providers, there are technology providers within Windship Association and International Windship Association. There are class society as well. So IWSA and Windship are actively working towards making a level playing field for all low emission propulsion technologies. So the target is that we can move from a fuel-centric approach to a propulsion-centric approach, to a ship propulsion-centric approach. So we are working to propose drivers to the market to consider wake-to-well impact. That's where the wind propulsion is a no-brainer. And we are also making sure that scientifically proven figures are available to safeguard the investment. And that's how we can roll out wind propulsion at a larger scale.
Merci Florent. Je me tourne à nouveau vers
Florent. Moving to Géraud from Michelin now.
Vous êtes en train de lancer un projet.
You are launching a project on the market, a coalition of cargo owners and chargers. Could you tell us a little bit more? Can you tell us a little bit about this? I'll let you have some time for it to filter through. Well, with 14 other chargers, we have got together to launch a tender concerning containers with wind-powered or Vedic power. So with regard to supply and demand, and we don't have much offer from ship owners, so they're not very so interested in cutting down fuel. So we want to push forward solutions which are very energy saving. So we had Nils was telling us in the first roundtable, we used the Neoline project, and we said we wanted to launch something which is more specifically on containers, which respond to our objectives. And so we meet the chargers who are quite in favor. And through this initiative, they see an opportunity to be able to change patterns around the business model concerning the way in which they operate, their approach, and also it's really interesting, entering a very interesting phase. Now, I agree with our colleague from CDC said. We've got to find ship owners who are going to be able to answer problems that we have, that we've said, and financiers who've said that they're ready to finance these new technologies, new kind of transport. Thank you. You are wanting specific answers from port-to-port transport with the energy. What kind of ships are you talking about? Well, we're talking, our request is about 500 kilos, if we correctly understood. We're talking about daily departure, different, every week, one from North Europe and one from Southern Europe, which will represent about 8 to 10 boats, depending on the time scale. A volume will be quite important of ships, probably sister ships, and they are going to be set up for this specific line. Have you seen any interest from ship owners, from dockyards, from studies? Well, yes. Now we have sent our request to a dozen or so, to 10 or so consortia. So these are, they are studies, they're kind of design centers. They're also shipping companies. And we've had 5 official answers, but we are continuing to discuss with the others to have a rough idea, to have a widest possible panel of candidates who will be answering that. Thank you very much. So I see there are some ship owners and cargo shifters who are very interested in this, very important. Jean-Philippe from CIC. How could CIC, this is a bank, support this? Have you already been contacted by consortia to finance this kind of thing? Well, not yet. As Ludovic said, we were a bank mandated to finance the first boat and the first one of Neoline as well. These are projects which take some time, but we're of great interest to us. I was saying just now, for a banker to deal with this whole question of VEDIC, this is not very interested. It's not simple because there's green feed. They don't have a track record, you see. That's very difficult. We're very different from the usual conditions in which we are able to play a role in shipping. But I am lucky enough to belong to a group for which ecological transit is very important. CERC is part of the Crédit Mutuel group, and we have become a bank which is very interested in support for societies. I've had the support of the management on that, but we don't necessarily tick all the boxes. That's rather difficult because it's not the usual kind of financing that we offer there. So we've got to perhaps change a little bit attitude to be able to grasp these files, and I think it won't be able to be done without some support from the government. So there is some practical participation from the DEM, which is very important because we're talking about financing. But the ships are never 100% financed, of course. And one can understand that for small operators, well, and this is quite a complicated subject which has got to be addressed, and the financing will benefit from provisions which have been announced, which were announced last autumn. So we do benefit, or we will benefit from a good guarantee. We're working now with them. This is not a very simple subject for them either. So we are combining this with optimized fiscal conditions, which make it possible to reduce, their outlay for our ship owners, but also for these ships, we hope that they will also be able to take advantage of the green point, which makes it possible to cover them when the money has to be paid. And so I think that these projects will have some chances if we've got cargo users who are there, because we've got much more expensive boats, so we've got running costs which are pretty expensive, even if we can reduce fuel costs by using wind. But the chargers and cargo units have got to accept the price of the processor. So if there isn't any need for transport, I don't want to state the obvious, but we know that the ship owners and those who use the cargo boats have their role to play as well. Several questions. So what about investment, the risk, the counter guarantees, which states and governments can offer? We know that Europe also subsidizes many projects. We've got many people around the table who've been using European subsidies to improve that. A situation to John Cooper for BAT Technology. John, in English.
By EU, a grant within the scope of Horizon project.
Ludovic,
Yes. Can you hear us? Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. John, you have been awarded by EU a grant within the scope of Horizon project. Could you please tell us a little bit more about it? Who are the participants and what are the goals actually?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you're quite right, Ludovic. We have been awarded a grant. It's called Project Check. It's from the EU, so big thanks to them under their Horizon programme. There are a number of key participants. I'll make sure I get all of these correct. Cargill, one of the biggest charterers in the world. Wärtsilä, looking at the future powertrains. Delta Marine, some really big names here. Lloyd's Registry, MSC, Hazatech, Silverstream, and probably one of the biggest roles is the University of Vasa in Finland, and they're gluing us all together. So Project Check is organised into work programmes, which is led by the different companies that I've just mentioned within this consortia. And Bar Technologies, we're engaged in the modelling of a Kamsarmax vessel in association with our WinWings technology. Then we're taking our design and having it manufactured, and it culminates in the fitting of the WinWings onto a Kamsarmax in the latter part of this year. So even though we're proud of our wind wings, which will deliver up to 30% fuel savings and CO2 savings on global routes, one of the keys to this project is working together with these other giants in the marine industry. I think we're leaders in our field, but we're all together, and it's very important that we are together to overcome this global challenge that we all face. And Czech has been really instrumental in helping us with that key task of making really good connections with these big companies. But it's also helped us engage with all of the other stakeholders, and we've built a significant pipeline for wind wings after this first installation. So keys are, we're all together, and wind is the free fuel. Thanks to everybody in Project Czech, and thanks to you, Ludovic.
Merci, John. On a eu
Thank you, John.
de sujets abordés.
So we dealt with lots of topics, the carriers, funding,
petit à petit.
and we can see in the press lots of projects, lots of ship owners who commit themselves as to support the project. AM is supporting SMO. We've heard about the Manfred projects, the Canopy project, the Observer 2 project, and all the projects that have been described and introduced by John Cooper. So really, it looks good, really. What would you say, so as to provide us with your conclusions?
The idea is that the fact that we have to move from a fuel-centric approach to a full ship propulsion approach, to move to a wake-to-well consideration. And to come back to your question, Ludovic, so the idea is that all the maritime stakeholders, institutions, must fully integrate the whole potential of wind propulsion as a direct propulsion. And as we've seen, some already are, plenty already are, but there are still plenty of challenges. There are solutions which are ready for deployment. We've got challenges for a significant rollout within the industry. And that's how, with this massive rollout, that's how we could get the associated double-digit decarbonation figures to a larger scale. And now, as a sector, what everybody thinks and what I think most of us would push is that we need to collectively move forward. We need to start deploying this solution. We need to scale up. And we need to pave the way for the future hybrid vessels, zero-emission vessels that are coming. So wind solution is a solution now, and is going to be a solution tomorrow as well. It's a facilitator to the pathways that we have to follow now. And because we need to protect our oceans, and we need to protect our planet. Thank you.
Bien, je pense que...
So, well done, well done. Congratulations.
Intéressant de voir
it was very interesting
when
it comes to carriers with different stakeholders, so to see that innovation really is a part of all that. So I think the challenge is very realistic indeed. So prior to having a debate, Florent, I think we've got different testimonies. Wind-powered vessel is important, of course, for different territories, regions, or nations. So lots of possibilities do exist to use the wind-powered vessels, and lots of regions, territories are maybe interested in very specific industries. Mr. QF, Deputy President, Vice President of the region of Brittany, you have the floor now. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. It is true that the region of Brittany does have an history and an heritage in using sails and wind-powered vessels. We are faced with a huge challenge that led to the fact that the region of Brittany is more and more interested into the see, we do think that the green transition will find solutions in maritimes, transportations. So we are faced with important challenges. The green transitions provide us with choices between the different solutions, but those solutions must exist, of course, and that is our challenge. We must find and define the solutions which exist, and if they do exist, a region such as the region of Brittany must be able to implement those in terms of research, designs, and industrial implementation. So that is really essential. The other point is to define the gaps. What is lacking? Which trade do we want? Which commercial ties do we want? If, of course, wind power vessels help us to reduce our carbon footprint, what will we ship? What will these ships will carry if that is detrimental to the carbon footprint when it comes to the production of the goods? That is not good. Of course, if the conditions of the seafarers or the seamen are not good enough, we can see that the slaves of the modern world are the seafarers, the seamen today. So we must have a very comprehensive approach, and we must, of course, reconsider our trade vision. Of course, we must consider different carriers, different stakeholders who can implement new industries for supply chain, and so has to deliver the goods to the different actors. We of course, amazed and very happy by the success accompanied by Grain de Sel. And even though that is a weak signal, the consumers at large will request to know how things were produced and what mode of shipping was used. So we may need to use slower mode of transportations, and we must probably adopt a more slower approach when it comes to our daily life. Generally speaking, of course, we've got 2,300 kilometers of coast in Brittany, and so it is important to consider this, and we will try to make sure that our harbor can cater to and host such vessels, and we must be able to build wind power vessels. We have invested 230 million euros in Brest, in a polder which is dedicated to marine renewable energies. We want to transform our quays, our harbors, our supply chains and logistics. We must anticipate in the future needs of our harbor. Of course, I'm thinking about the small port of harbor, which can host new kind of ships, not container ships, but probably wind power ships that would, of course, carry smaller goods, and we shall revamp altogether maritime transportation, I think. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Kuef. Mr. Felix Lineman, who is the head of the blue economy at the DG Marine. Felix, we would like to know, you're working at the European Commission. You're online. So what kind of support does the European Commission offer? Which kind of tool can you develop, and how can you support that implementation? Thank you, Felix. We are listening to you now.
Oui, bonjour. Merci de m'avoir invité.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
J'ai suivi la traduction anglaise jusqu'ici là, donc je suis un tout petit peu.
So I was following the English translation. So I was Following the debate, I heard a debate with main objectives in Europe, the Green Act, which is the new objective of the Commission for the next coming years, aims at transforming the Union into a modern economy in using the resources, and we want to reduce our carbon footprint by 2050 and to experience an economic growth that is dissociated from the use of resources. As for maritime transportation, the objectives lead to radical changes, and that's what we saw in projects such as those that have been presented previously. So Europe is very ambitious in that field, especially when it comes to marine renewable energy, 50 gigawatts in 2050, 5 times the actual volume we're experiencing today in 2030, or 25 times the actual level we're experiencing and we have today in 2050. That is feasible, but of course we must consider beyond the sole productions of energy. You can see the challenges, similar challenging when it comes to wind power and wind power vessels. That represents a major potential. There again, the developers are already, and different companies operating in this industry are ready. We must use the skills and the local ecosystems that are very strong. We must use these skills and competencies we have so as to transfer the technology and the technological skills. Of course, the maritime industry wants to diversify itself. There are numerous projects that exist for cruise ships, sailing ships, but also fishing vessels. And some operators are involved that have committed themselves, that provide us with an opportunity for growth. And we have adopted a new approach for a more sustainable development last year, which recognized that wind power, of course, is a true alternative. That was also actually registered into a new document which allows us to have renewable power featuring less carbon footprint and lots of financial European mechanisms which exist that are dedicated to these promising technologies, and the European funds for maritime affairs, which has already funded lots of projects that we heard of today. So we do have a number of tools that do exist to support those projects in order to summarize, really. Thank you very much, Mr. Lehmann. Thank you for those good news. So we do have time for Q&A, for questions and answers now. Questions from the audience. I want to invite Yves Parlier to join me, really. He does have testimony to provide us with, I think. So, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to provide you with my vision as a seaman. I've used wind power for my ships, really. Of course, we were less quick than cargo before, but when I finished my career, we were twice as quick as a cargo. And now it's even better. And I've started a new adventure beyond the seas in order to find new solutions. It seems obvious for me that engine power vessels should use wind power to reduce the carbon footprint. So I set up my company, and we are developing the Sea Kite technology, which will allow to reduce the existing vessels, to decrease the carbon footprint by using those sea kites. So, of course, the benefit of the kite is that when it comes to the retrofit, it's pretty minimal on the deck of the ships.
Quand le vent est portant, de créer son propre vent apparent et donc
we can use some apparent wind, so we can increase by 10 times the equivalent surface compared with traditional sails. So we're not competing really with traditional sails. So all the systems that we have seen since the Sea Kite is using a wind current which is specific, and we can combine different wind power technologies on new vessels, and in the future we will have hybrid systems using systems that will be fixed and other systems that will be in the air, such as the kite sail, of course. And we shall launch a new catamaran, the Sea Kite, that we will use in 2023-2024. And we shall promote the technology, and in order to continue to develop this technology, we have roughly 60 clients who do use that technology, and we want to provide that technology to more than 1,000 clients or vessels by 2025. And we are delighted to see that there is really awareness raising pertaining to this topic. Thank you very much.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Yves.
Thank you, Yves. If that works, Mr. Felix Tillemann, are you still with us? I think there's a question from Stéphanie Lesage, so we'll try to ask that question. If that does work.
Si, c'est bon, vas-y.
Je suis là.
Bonjour, Monsieur Lindemann. Yes, I'm here. Hello, Mr. Lindemann. I have a question for you. And with regard to what you said about the support of the European Union with regard to wind power, wind propulsion, we see that there is some support, but it was more or less a comment, I think. I think that there's the EU Fuel Directive, and I think it's important to go further than that. We've seen that the European Commission, particularly waterborne, that wind power hasn't yet got its full place. And it's put into the heading energy efficiency, but I think that wind power really has got to be a cornerstone. It's got to really have its proper place. It's got to be named. It's not just a question of energy saving and energy efficiency. It's really a full power in itself, and I think it's important to be recognized like that, so it could be used across the board to be able to decarbonate the maritime sector. Thank you.
Merci. J'ai compris ça plus qu'un commentaire.
Thank you. I understood that this is more than a comment or a commentary. It's a question, but I hear you loud and clear, and I think that the logic is that everything is in the wind, as it were, and it's a real by definition, it's a fuel in itself. The wind is a fuel power. And I think that this is a part of discussion between the different departments in the Commission. We're going to move towards recognition of wind power. And this is where I hear you loud and clear. You're coming across your message, but I think that we we need to have full recognition of wind power. So thank you very much for your comment there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lehmann. Thank you for your answer that you've had to give off the cuff, as it were. We've got some time now, a little bit of time, to have any quick questions from the public or any comments. If you've got any questions, any comments, please, now's the time. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Des volontaires? Oui.
Thank you.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Patrick Engelbert from Propel Wind. We are a startup from 2008 and a restart-up in 2020 because the climate awareness has allowed us to put wind again on the plate. What I want to state is that 20% of the ship owners only are interested in wind. Wind has a poor image from dreamers, from, yes, again, the past, but the past is not the present today. So we must be aware of that it is very difficult to convince ship owners for wind for assistance. Wind for main propulsion will be even more difficult. A second statement, and referring to green fuels, today people expect to spend trillions to develop ammonia, hydrogen, and all kinds of very difficult stuff, which all have their risk profile. Ammonia is extremely toxic, and there is no solution today. It's still under investigation. Hydrogen is very explosive, but both are very expensive as such. And secondly, they will rely on green energy. But if you look at the reports from the International Energy Association, it will be very difficult to give green energy to everybody. And the priority today will be for road transportation and other domains which are much more polluting than the shipping industry. So eventually, reducing the consumption of green fuels is absolutely critical. If you make a very simple calculation of 3 rows, you will see that if you produce green fuel, green ammonia from wind energy, if you inject 100 kilowatt green energy in the ammonia process, and you consume this ammonia on board internal combustion engine, etc., you divide this 100 by 6. You still have 15 kilowatt propulsion power. If you put a wind device on deck of the ship, you use 100% of this energy. And it's very easy, it's just factual. It's linked to the number of kilowatt you need to produce ammonia. It links to the energy content of the ammonia. It links to the efficiency of an engine. It's really basic. And that is why probably the message to the world today, please use the wind you have next to you instead of using it through windmills, through a complete chain of equipment. I could still talk for 6 hours for that, but let's say I give the word again to the public. And if you want to discuss about it, I'm available anytime until tomorrow night. Thank you.
Yes, I would just like to make a point of order. It was a very interesting statement, but I would like to draw your attention that alas, or fortunately, there is plenty of room for developing all sorts of means to reduce or to increase decarbonation of transport. And, but we, the supporters of wind sailing, we are not fighting against all other possibilities. You may have in the hydrogen or in, how do you say, carburant de synthèse, we know plenty of operators who are working hard. And I wish them a lot of success, a lot of success to sailing, but I wish also a lot of success to these people. And we should be careful. No, wind is an ideal solution. I am really sincerely convinced. I'm pushing it. That's why I'm here. But I also think that we should encourage any other possibility to reduce decarbonation and the petrol.
Merci, Francis.
Francis, we've still got some time left. Anybody wants to say anything? Anything that you a burning issue? Any public any questions from the audience? Well, yes. Is there one there? We want. Sorry, we need a mic. Can't hear otherwise. Please. Yeah. Thank you. So my question really was Europe. I want to know from Europe. Well, the European Bank, how about the European Bank? Could you give us a guarantee or back up the financing or help us build new boats, wind propulsed? The European Bank.
Alors on va voir si ça fonctionne. Je suis pas sûr qu'on ait une réponse tout de suite.
I don't know if we'll get an answer immediately. Did you get the question?
En principe, c'est tout à fait faisable. Il y a des investissements dans l'économie bleue.
Il est d'accord.
We can't hear that. We got, you know, there's a rather bad line, as you can see. So I think in principle was the answer. Yes, in principle.
Comme le gaz. Mais évidemment, pour les véhicules.
Of course, there are other things. We've got gas and so on, but I think that, yes, in principle, yes.
Excusez-nous, monsieur.
Sorry, but we only heard part of the question, but we understood that the answer was positive, but we didn't really get it because of technological conditions. Sorry. Thank you very much for your answers. Thank you very much for your answers that you've had to give us. It were off the cuff. There's somewhere right at the back. It was a question that you were breaking up all the time. Sorry, Mr. Lehmann. Yes, there's a question from the back. Well, I wasn't here. I wasn't here all the time, but I want to have a question. I'm responsible for Skravik. We've been working on sailing for other areas such as fishing and scientific research. And this is a question which comes back to what was said, which is addressed to the future ship owners. In other words, how in the future this proximity and cabotage, short haul cabotage, is this a market which is of interest to us to enable us to offer something which is very different in terms of models of society and models which could also be concentrated, as Mr. Goff was saying, between supply, resources, and maybe more complicated for chocolate because that's further long haul. But for the short haul cabotage, perhaps we can do things at home to be able to decarbonate transport. And this might be something which will make it possible to provide political support to replace this, because we've got, for lorries, for trucks, we've got a kind of energy mix which is better. But for sailing and boats, I'd like to ask our ship owners whether they're interested in the short haul cabotage or whether they're only interested in transoceanic transport. Thank you.
Alors, une réponse très rapide d'Olivier.
Très rapide, ouais. Il ne faut pas forcément
rester
plus, évidemment, sur le transocéanique.
We don't have to only focus on transoceanic transport. If we look at the final user, the client, today, people want to build better quality products. That's what they want to buy. They want to buy bio products and better quality products. But they're also interested in the way in which these products are transported. They're interested in that. It makes more sense as to what, after all, remains still an act of purchase. So for my part, as far as I'm concerned, I'm thinking about this. Although we've invested in a kind of cargo sailboat, which is going to be built as well the next forthcoming days, for it is a very high expenditure for a company. But globally, it actually provides less risk for our company because our clients are very much more favorable to this kind of company which has got involved in this kind of adventure. It's a new venture, really. It's not simple. I mean, it has to be very heavily prepared. You've got to be pretty experienced in financing projects, in lots of ways of knowing how to set this. You've got to be credible. You've got to be. But whether for its transoceanic transport or whether it's for short-haul projects, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done, and for me, for a company, I don't think it is a risk for a company. On the contrary, I think it reduces risk in a very significant way. Thank you.
Bien, merci beaucoup, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Olivier.
So now I will switch back to English. We've got only 2 minutes, thank you. Gavin Allwright, Secretary General of the International Windship Association, if you are with us. Gavin, you will have the hard task to conclude our session. I would like, if you could tell us, as an association, as a sector, what is your message for the government, for the chief of states, for our audience, obviously, today? What are we proposing as main takeaways for this One Ocean Summit?
Yeah, thank you, Florent. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yep.
And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gavin Allwright, Secretary General of the International Windship Association, which is a not-for-profit organisation representing over 150 companies and leading experts from over 35 countries worldwide, dedicated to developing and deploying wind propulsion solutions, and some of whom you've heard from today. I'd like to thank you, Florent, and my expert colleagues and speakers on delivering this excellent forum. And as Florent mentioned, it's my role this morning to help draw a line under these wind propulsion proceedings in a few minutes, which is going to be a tough one. Yeah, I wish I could be there in person today to talk with all of you, but thank you to the One Ocean Summit organisers for inviting me to deliver these recommendations, specifically focused towards policymakers and leaders. We've already heard calls for an appropriate level of carbon pricing and levies to be brought into the shipping industry, and you know these are very clear calls. So I won't take time repeating those now, but they are vital. Critically, we need to fully integrate the potential of wind propulsion and wind-powered ships within international and European institutions in order to further improve ocean protection and urgently deliver on decarbonisation pledges by adopting a propulsion or energy-centric approach rather than a narrow fuel-centric one. To this end, actively supporting the evolution of the International Maritime Organization text so that wind propulsion is considered in the same way as alternative fuels, and we've heard some calls today for that, and is brought to the heart of maritime transport decarbonisation pathways. Also promoting direct wind power for shipping in European policies. I think we've heard that clear message, dedicated to the greening of the fleet, including in the proposals currently under discussion, such as Fuel EU Maritime and the wider Fit 55 programme. Another key recommendation is a really concrete one, to deploy a fleet of wind-propelled vessels in island territories that are extremely vulnerable to climate change and that will be confronted with the challenges of availability and costs of alternative fuels, in particular Pacific Islands, but also the Caribbean territories and many other least developed regions and small island developing states. This fleet will stand as a strong contributing factor in building resilience in those regions, but also it will be a symbol of international solidarity and a commitment to a just transition in the ocean sphere. Your support nationally, regionally, and internationally for research, development, and deployment of direct wind propulsion systems and vessels will be a clear, unequivocal message that urgent and deep reductions in shipping emissions are not just possible this decade, but affordable and hugely beneficial to the blue economy and the ocean environment. You know, as we say in IWSA, this is a win-win-win situation for all. And I'd like to thank policymakers, the speakers and experts in the room there and the audience for their attention and joining us for a wind propulsion future for shipping. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin. Maintenant, je voudrais remercier une dernière fois Francis Vallat de nous avoir permis d'être ici.
I would like to thank Francis for being here today.
D'être là. Thank you very much to everybody, all the people looking at us on their computers. I think it was a very interesting session. I'm very glad that the last speaker mentioned this inter-island matter, because we have so many things still to discuss and we should think more and more, but we do it, about what is happening in our overseas territories where the wind may be an excellent solution indeed. Well, anyway, so it's still open. We shall now push these recommendations toward the chiefs of states and the government, and thank you again for your attention, and thank you for all the speakers. I think it was a nice opening for this summit. Thank you very much.